Walk down any pharmacy aisle and count the bottles. Magnesium, vitamin A, omega 3s, iron, probiotics, B12. The labels use the language of science, the pricing of luxury, and the implied promise that without them, you are somehow falling short. The average American household spends over $800 a year on dietary supplements. $800. And most of it passes right through the body without being absorbed the way a real food matrix allows. Here is what those bottles almost never tell you: the compounds they isolate existed long before the bottle. They existed in the seed, the leaf, the root, and the fermented jar. They existed in the pantry of your great-grandmother, who had no idea what sulforaphane was, but knew that sauerkraut kept her family well through winter. They existed in the fields of ancient Egypt and the kitchens of the Roman Empire and the traveling packs of Aztec warriors. Today, we are walking through 13 plant foods, specific, precise, historically rooted, that do much of what those expensive capsules claim to do, at a fraction of the price. And with a depth of supporting compounds the bottle simply cannot replicate. Stay with us through number 1. Most people have had it in their kitchen for years and used it almost entirely wrong. When you learn the one small preparation step that changes everything, you will never make that mistake again. And when we reach number 7, we are going to pause for a story. It involves a man walking alone in a desert. 3 days without food or water, lying down under a tree and asking to die. And what happened next, and why it happened, is one of the most quietly remarkable moments in all of ancient health literature. Number 13. Brazil nuts. The Brazil nut does not actually grow in orchards. It grows in the Amazon rainforest canopy on trees that can live for 500 years. And it falls to the forest floor inside a hard wooden pod the size of a coconut, containing a cluster of seeds arranged like sections of a citrus fruit. Indigenous Amazonian peoples have eaten these seeds for thousands of years, not because a label told them to, but because the forest provided them and they sustained life. The reason nutritional scientists pay attention to Brazil nuts today is selenium. Selenium is a trace mineral your body cannot manufacture on its own and must acquire through diet. It plays essential roles in thyroid hormone conversion, immune function, and the activity of antioxidant enzymes, particularly a family called glutathione peroxidases, which are among your body's primary cellular defense systems. One Brazil nut can contain anywhere from 60 to 90 micrograms of selenium. The recommended daily intake for adults is 55 micrograms. You could meet a full day's requirement from a single seed. Here's what makes this especially interesting. From a historical perspective, populations living in selenium-poor soils, stretching across parts of China, Finland, and New Zealand, developed documented health consequences before scientists even understood why. The ancient Amazonian peoples living near Brazil nut trees appear never to have faced this particular deficiency. The forest was, in effect, doing the supplementing. The critical preparation note is this: do not eat more than 2 per day. This is one of the few foods where a little is optimal and more is genuinely counterproductive. Brazil nuts are so concentrated in selenium that eating a large handful daily can push you past the tolerable upper limit of 400 micrograms, producing a condition called selenosis, nail brittleness, hair loss, a garlic-like odor on the breath. One nut delivers power. A bag delivers excess. 1 or 2 each morning, eaten whole. Is the ancestral pattern worth returning to? The Amazon did not give us a supplement. It gave us a seed. The distinction matters. Number 12. Pumpkin seeds. The mineral treasure most people discard. Every October, millions of people scoop handfuls of flat green seeds out of pumpkins and throw them in the trash. Every October, they discard one of the most mineral-dense foods their grocery budget could provide. Pumpkin seeds, called pepitas in their hulled form, have been eaten across the Americas for at least 7,000 years. Archaeological evidence from Oaxaca. Mexico places their use as a cultivated food crop at roughly 7 Pietzet Betse. The Aztec Pharmacopoeia, which Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagún documented in the 16th century Florentine Codex, described pumpkin seeds as a treatment for parasites and kidney complaints. This was not superstition. We now know that cucurbitacins, compounds found in the seeds. They have demonstrated antiparasitic properties. In laboratory studies, the traditional use and the mechanism align. But what earns pumpkin seeds a place in this conversation is their magnesium density. 1 ounce, roughly a small handful, contains approximately 150 milligrams of magnesium. The recommended daily intake for adult men is 420 milligrams. For women, 320 milligrams. That means a modest handful gets you roughly a third of the way there. Given that surveys consistently show somewhere between 50 and 80% of Americans consume less magnesium than recommended. This is not a trivial contribution. Magnesium participates in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body. Muscle contraction, nerve transmission, blood sugar regulation, protein synthesis, sleep quality through its role in activating the parasympathetic nervous system and its involvement in melatonin production. People buy magnesium glycinate and magnesium citrate capsules for these exact purposes. Pumpkin seeds carry the mineral in a food matrix that also includes zinc, plant protein, healthy fats, and iron. Eat them raw or lightly roasted. Do not roast them at high heat for long periods, as this degrades the beneficial fats. A light roast at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes preserves both flavor and nutrition. Store them in an airtight container away from heat and light. If you grow your own pumpkins, scoop the seeds, rinse them in a colander, lay them flat to dry for a day, and roast them yourself. The treasure was always inside the pumpkin. Number 11. Lentils. In the 25th chapter of Genesis, Esau returns from the field famished and trades his birthright to his brother Jacob for a bowl of red lentil stew. Scholars have spent centuries discussing the theology of this exchange. Nutritionists are increasingly interested in the stew itself. Lentils are among the oldest cultivated foods on Earth. Evidence of lentil cultivation in the Fertile Crescent dates to approximately 8 Nulabi Tse, predating most grains. The ancient Egyptians stored them in sufficient quantity that archaeologists have found lentils in burial tombs alongside gold. In ancient Rome, they were considered food for the poor, which is ironic. Given what we now understand about their nutritional density, a cup of cooked lentils delivers approximately 18 grams of protein, 16 grams of fiber, 37% of the recommended daily folate intake, 37% of the daily iron target, and meaningful amounts of potassium, phosphorus, and manganese. For a food that costs roughly 30 cents per serving, this is an extraordinary nutritional profile. The iron in lentils is non-heme iron, the plant-based form, which the body absorbs less efficiently than heme iron from animal sources. This is a real limitation, not a myth. However, and this is where traditional cooking wisdom intersects precisely with modern biochemistry, vitamin C consumed in the same meal dramatically increases non-heme iron absorption, sometimes doubling or tripling it. Your great-grandmother squeezed lemon over her lentil soup by instinct. Modern research calls this iron absorption enhancement through ascorbic acid co-ingestion. The mechanism is the same. Also, worth noting, lentils are the only legume that requires no soaking and cooks in 20 to 30 minutes. They store for years in a sealed container. In times of food scarcity, throughout history, from siege warfare to long sea voyages to harsh winters, lentils were survival currency. The bowl Esau traded his birthright for was not just filling. It was, by modern nutritional measures, genuinely valuable. Number 10. Kale. Kale is not a trend. It is a very old plant that underwent a strange marketing cycle, forgotten, then overhyped. Now, hopefully understood for what it actually is, one of the most nutrient-dense leafy vegetables available to home gardeners and ordinary grocery shoppers anywhere in the temperate world. Kale belongs to the species Brassica oleracea, the same species as cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower, a single wild coastal plant that humans have selectively cultivated into radically different forms over thousands of years. Kale's curly, loose-leafed form is among the oldest cultivated varieties. Grown in ancient Greece and Rome, Pliny the Elder, in his 1st century natural history, described different kale varieties and their uses. Medieval European peasants called it colewort and grew it because it survived winter when almost nothing else did. That frost hardiness is not just an agricultural convenience. Cold temperatures trigger a biochemical response. In kale, the plant converts starches to sugars as a kind of antifreeze, which is why frost-kissed kale tastes sweeter and less bitter. This is not folk wisdom. It is measurable sugar chemistry happening inside the leaf. Nutritionally, kale delivers vitamin K, one in extraordinary concentrations. 1 cup of raw kale provides 6 to 7 times the recommended daily intake. Vitamin K1 is essential for blood clotting and plays a role in bone mineralization by activating proteins that regulate calcium deposition. It also carries vitamin C, beta-carotene, and calcium in a form that is, surprisingly, more bioavailable than the calcium in cow's milk because kale contains relatively low levels of oxalates compared to spinach, allowing calcium absorption to proceed more efficiently. The green powders sold for $30 to $60 a jar often list kale as the primary ingredient. A bunch of kale at the grocery store costs roughly $2 and delivers the same compounds in a living food matrix that includes water, fiber, and enzymatic activity that drying and processing destroy. Grow it in cool weather. Harvest the outer leaves and let the center keep producing. And do not overcook it. A quick sauté or a brief steam preserves far more than boiling. Number 9. Sunflower seeds. The sunflower is one of only a handful of major food crops that originated in North America rather than Asia, the Middle East, or Europe. Indigenous peoples of the American plains, including the Hopi, the Hidatsa, and the Lakota cultivated sunflowers for at least 3,000 years before European contact, breeding them from small-headed wild plants into the large, seed-rich varieties we recognize today. They pressed the seeds for oil, ground them into flour, mixed them with dried meat and fat for portable travel food, and used the plant medicinally for conditions ranging from snakebite to pulmonary complaints. What those indigenous farmers understood through generations of observation, modern nutritional chemistry confirms sunflower seeds are one of the richest dietary sources of vitamin E, specifically alpha-tocopherol, the form the body uses most efficiently. 1 ounce provides approximately 37% of the daily recommended intake for vitamin E. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant that operates primarily in cell membranes, protecting the lipid bilayer from oxidative damage. Because it is fat-soluble, it accumulates in fatty tissues and works alongside fat-soluble compounds rather than water-soluble antioxidants. Research has associated adequate vitamin E status with immune function, skin integrity, and potentially reduced oxidative stress in neural tissue, though the science is still developing in some of these areas, and the results in supplemental trials have been notably mixed. The food form, embedded in a matrix of healthy fats, may behave differently in the body than isolated alpha-tocopherol in a capsule. Sunflower seeds also carry selenium, magnesium, and B vitamins. Store them cool and away from light, as their high fat content makes them susceptible to rancidity. Raw is best, lightly roasted is fine. The good fats are why indigenous peoples valued them. For long journeys they were caloric, stable, and sustaining in a way that pure carbohydrates are not. Number 8. Beets. The Romans prized the beet, both as vegetable and medicine. Apicius, the 1st century Roman cookbook writer, included beet recipes alongside instructions for their use in digestive complaints. The ancient Greeks regarded the beet as valuable enough to offer on silver platters at the Oracle of Delphi. And in Jewish tradition, the beet, called selek in Hebrew, appears in Talmudic texts as both a food and a subject of blessing on Rosh Hashanah. Eaten with prayers that enemies would depart. The symbolism of the beet's name, related to a root word meaning to depart, gave it ritual significance across a culture that also understood its practical value. The reason athletes started paying premium prices for beetroot shots and powders is straightforward biochemistry. Beets are among the richest dietary sources of inorganic nitrate, approximately 250 milligrams per 100 gram serving of raw beet. The body converts dietary nitrate to nitrite, then to nitric oxide, a signaling molecule that triggers vascular smooth muscle to relax, widening blood vessels. This vasodilation reduces the oxygen cost of physical exertion and can meaningfully improve exercise performance, particularly in endurance activities. Research published in the Journal of Applied Physiology and replicated in multiple subsequent studies has found that beetroot supplementation amounts achievable through ordinary food intake can reduce blood pressure by approximately 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury in people with hypertension, a reduction comparable to some pharmaceutical interventions. The research is considered strong enough that the effect is used as a positive control in clinical studies of cardiovascular interventions. Roast them whole in their skins. This concentrates the natural sugars and preserves the nitrate content better than boiling, which leaches water-soluble compounds into the cooking water. The greens are edible and contain calcium, potassium, and iron. Do not discard them. A beet harvested from the garden is 2 vegetables. Number 7. Chia seeds. First, a story. The book of 1 Kings, chapter 19. The prophet Elijah has just called down fire from heaven on the altar of the Lord, defeating the 450 prophets of Baal before the assembled people of Israel. It is, by any measure, the peak of his prophetic career. Then Queen Jezebel sends him a message by tomorrow. You will be dead. And Elijah, this man who had just commanded fire from the sky, runs. He runs into the desert of Beersheba, one of the most arid and merciless landscapes on earth, sits down under a broom tree, and prays to die. It is enough, he says. Take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. Then he falls asleep, and an angel touches him and says, Arise and eat. There is a cake baked on coals and a cruse of water. He eats and drinks and lies down again. The angel returns a second time. Touch him, and says words that change everything. Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. He eats. He drinks. And on the strength of that food, that meal, he travels 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. Scholars have wondered about this passage for centuries. What was the food? The Hebrew word used, uga, refers to a round flatbread, possibly made with ground seeds, fat, and water, similar to what desert travelers of that era carried. Nutritional historians, who have studied ancient Semitic travel provisions, note that high-fat, high-fiber seed-based cakes were common survival rations compact. Calorie dense, requiring nothing but fire to prepare. That isn't just poetry. That is a description of what we now call metabolic restoration, the delivery of sustained-release carbohydrate, or fat, and protein to a body in acute exhaustion, enabling the nervous system to reset. What Elijah needed was not a miracle food. He needed real food, delivered at the right moment. The angel understood something a modern sports nutritionist would recognize immediately. Which brings us to chia seeds, not because they were necessarily the seed in Elijah's cake, but because they represent the same principle, maximum nutritional density in the smallest possible package, carried by people who needed to travel far on very little. The name Chia comes from the Nahuatl word chian, meaning oily or strength. Aztec and Mayan warriors consumed chia seeds before battle and on long marches, mixed with water into a gel they called chian pinole. Spanish conquistadors recorded their own soldiers struggling to keep pace with indigenous runners who fueled themselves on nothing but chia and water for extraordinary distances. 1 ounce of chia seeds contains 11 grams of fiber, 4 grams of protein, 5 grams of omega, 3 fatty acids as alpha-linolenic acid, and meaningful amounts of calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. When immersed in liquid, chia seeds absorb 10 to 12 times their weight in water, forming a gel from a soluble fiber called mucilage. This gel slows gastric emptying, moderates blood glucose, rise after eating, and sustains satiety for hours. The omega-3 content deserves specific attention. Alpha-linolenic acid is the plant form of omega-3 and must be converted in the body to EPA and DHA, the forms found in fish oil. That conversion efficiency is relatively low. Estimates range from 5 to 15%, which is why fish-based omega-3 sources remain nutritionally distinct. However, for plant-based diets, chia offers the most concentrated whole food source of ALA available. And even the unconverted form has demonstrated independent anti-inflammatory properties in research. Soak chia seeds for at least 20 minutes before eating to allow the gel to form. This also makes the seeds easier to digest. Eating a large spoonful of dry chia seeds followed by water is not the traditional method and can cause discomfort. A tablespoon soaked overnight in half a cup of unsweetened almond milk with a small amount of raw honey eaten cold in the morning is the simplest version of a preparation that fed civilizations. If this kind of ancient knowledge resonates with you, hit the like button now and subscribe, because what's coming in the next few entries goes even deeper into the intersection of ancient tradition and modern science. Number 6. Spinach. Spinach is not native to Europe or the Americas. It originated in Persia, modern Iran, and entered the Arabic-speaking world around the 7th century, where physicians and botanists called it isfanach and documented its uses in medical texts. It reached Spain through the Moorish occupation, entered Italian monasteries in the 11th century, and from there spread through European cuisine. Catherine de' Medici, the 16th century Florentine queen of France. I reportedly liked spinach, so much she had it served at every meal, which is why dishes served on a bed of spinach are still called à la Florentine in classical French cooking. The Persian and Arab physicians who first documented spinach used it for what they called softening the chest and moistening the body descriptions, that, in the context of humoral medicine, likely referred to its laxative and anti-inflammatory properties. The soluble fiber in spinach does influence gut motility. The anti-inflammatory role of its carotenoids and vitamin K is now better understood. Spinach delivers folate, iron, magnesium, vitamin K, and lutein, a carotenoid that concentrates in the macula of the eye and is associated with reduced risk of age-related macular degeneration. It is also rich in potassium and vitamin A in the form of beta-carotene. Here's the preparation note that changes the math. Cooking spinach dramatically reduces its volume because water makes up 92% of the raw leaf. 1 pound of raw spinach becomes roughly 1 cup cooked, but the minerals remain. The folate and iron per gram of food increase sharply when the water cooks out. A cup of cooked spinach delivers approximately 36% of the daily iron target and 66% of the folate target, compared to roughly 5 and 15% from a cup raw. The caveat spinach is high in oxalic acid, which binds calcium and iron and reduces their absorption. For most people, this is not a meaningful concern at normal eating amounts. Those prone to calcium oxalate kidney stones, the most common kind, may benefit from moderating intake or relying on other leafy greens like kale, which is lower in oxalates, as their primary green. Pair spinach with a squeeze of lemon. The vitamin C enhances iron absorption, counteracting some of the oxalate interference. The ancient Persian physicians did not know about oxalic acid, but they did know that sour, citrus, and spinach went well together. The intuition was sound. Number 5. Oats. Oats were considered a weed by the Romans. Pliny the Elder described the Germanic tribes north of the Rhine as eating nothing but oatmeal porridge and considered this evidence of barbarism. The Romans grew wheat, the barbarians and the Scots, and the Irish, and the rural poor of northern Europe for the next 2,000 years ate oats. Then in 1997, the United States Food and Drug Administration authorized the first food-specific health claim in its history that oat beta-glucan, consumed as part of a diet low in saturated fat, may reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. The FDA does not extend such claims lightly. The evidence threshold required for a qualified health claim is substantial. Pliny's barbarian grain had become the gold standard for a cardiovascular food claim. Beta-glucan is a soluble fiber found in the cell walls of oat bran. When consumed, it dissolves in the gut to form a viscous gel that slows digestion and, critically, binds bile acids in the small intestine. The liver synthesizes bile acids from cholesterol. When those bile acids are bound and excreted rather than reabsorbed, the liver responds by pulling more cholesterol from the bloodstream to make new bile acids. LDL cholesterol levels fall. The mechanism is direct, measurable, and reproducible in clinical trials. A meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition Pooling results from over 1,000 subjects found that 3 grams of oat beta-glucan daily achievable from roughly 1.5 cups of cooked oatmeal reduced LDL cholesterol by an average of 5 to 7%. That is a modest but clinically meaningful effect for a breakfast food that costs 30 cents a serving. Buy old-fashioned rolled oats or steel-cut oats. Not instant. Instant oats are partially pre-cooked, which degrades the molecular weight of the beta-glucan and reduces its viscosity in the gut, meaning the effective dose of the active compound is lower. This is exactly the kind of processing distinction that matters and that supplement marketing never mentions. The rolled oat and the oat-based supplement capsule are not nutritionally equivalent. Cook them in water or milk. Add walnuts and blueberries. And eat them slowly. What the Romans called barbarism, the FDA eventually called a heart health claim. That arc is not unusual in the history of nutrition. Number 4. Blueberries. Blueberries are one of the few major fruits commercially grown almost exclusively in North America, where they are native. Indigenous peoples across the eastern continent used them for thousands of years. The Anishinaabe called them mienen, meaning berry, and considered them among the most important of the summer harvest. They dried them for winter, ground them into pemmican, and used the plant's leaves and berries medicinally for purposes ranging from wound care to childbirth support. The characteristic blue-purple pigmentation of blueberries comes from a class of flavonoids called anthocyanins, specifically a complex of at least 25 distinct anthocyanin molecules in a single berry. These compounds serve as ultraviolet light filters in the plant. In the human body, they function as antioxidants and appear to have anti-inflammatory properties through mechanisms including inhibition of pro-inflammatory enzyme pathways. The research on anthocyanins and cognitive function has become increasingly specific. A 12-week trial published in the European Journal of Nutrition found that daily wild blueberry supplementation, the equivalent of about a cup of berries, improved scores on memory tests and processing speed in older adults aged 60 to 75. A separate trial conducted at the University of Cincinnati found similar cognitive improvements in adults with mild cognitive impairment. The proposed mechanism involves anthocyanins' ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and reduce neuroinflammation, which is now understood to be a contributor to age-related cognitive decline. A cup of fresh blueberries, approximately 150 grams, contains 84 calories. SAN. 6 grams of fiber. 24% of the daily vitamin C requirement, and approximately 163 milligrams of anthocyanins. Frozen blueberries retain their anthocyanin content very well. One study found that freezing may actually break down cell walls and make the compounds more bioavailable than in fresh berries. Grow them if you have acidic soil. A pH of 4. Cinque to 5. Woo. They are perennial, long-lived, and productive. A properly established blueberry shrub will outlive most other garden plants. Harvest in summer and freeze what you cannot eat fresh. What indigenous peoples understood about this fruit by observation? Clinical neuroscience is now confirming, mechanistically. Number 3. Flaxseed. Flax may be the oldest cultivated plant in human history. Archaeological evidence from the Republic of Georgia dates cultivated flax to approximately 30,000 BCE, not just gathered, but selected, grown, and harvested. The ancient Egyptians used it both for linen and for food, recording its medical uses in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical documents in the world, dated to approximately 1550 BCE. Charlemagne, the 9th century Holy Roman Emperor, was convinced enough of flax's health properties that he issued laws requiring his subjects to eat it. Flax seeds are the richest plant source of alpha-linolenic acid, an omega-3 fatty acid, providing approximately 300 milligrams per tablespoon of ground seed. They are also the richest known source of lignans plant compounds that are converted by gut bacteria into enterolignans, which have been studied for their role in hormone balance, particularly in relation to estrogen metabolism. Research on dietary lignin intake and breast cancer risk has produced consistently interesting findings, though the science continues to develop and no definitive claims are appropriate. The flaxseed preparation point is non-negotiable. Whole seeds must be ground before eating. This is not optional and not merely a matter of texture. The seed coat of the flaxseed is essentially impermeable to digestive enzymes. Whole flax seeds pass through the gastrointestinal tract almost entirely intact, delivering fiber but allowing the omega-3 fatty acids and lignans inside to go largely unabsorbed. Studies have confirmed this directly by comparing blood levels of ALA after whole versus ground seed consumption. Grind them fresh in a coffee grinder. 30 seconds produces a fine meal from a tablespoon of whole seeds. Ground flaxseed oxidizes rapidly, which is why grinding fresh is preferable to buying pre-ground. If you buy pre-ground, store it sealed in the freezer and use it within 3 months. Add 1 tablespoon to oatmeal, to yogurt, or to a smoothie in the morning. The flavor is mild and slightly nutty. Charlemagne's instinct was correct. The preparation method our great-grandmothers used grinding fresh at the mill was also correct. We have simply had to rediscover it. Number 2. Garlic. Among all the foods in this list, garlic has perhaps the most thoroughly documented ancient medical history. The Ebers Papyrus, the same Egyptian document that mentioned flax, includes 22 garlic-based prescriptions for conditions ranging from heart trouble to parasitic infection to tumor-like swellings. Egyptian workers building the pyramids were recorded as receiving garlic as a daily ration, believed to maintain stamina and prevent illness. The Greek historian Herodotus noted this detail in the 5th century BCE. Hippocrates, writing in roughly 460 BCE, described garlic as a cleanser and diuretic, and recommended it for infections, respiratory conditions, and fatigue. Louis Pasteur demonstrated garlic's antibacterial properties in the laboratory in 1858. The ancient Chinese pharmacopoeia included garlic as a remedy for respiratory and digestive illness. Ayurvedic medicine classified it as a warming food with cleansing properties. The Talmud refers to garlic as one of the foods that gladdens the heart and warms the body. The convergence is complete. No ancient medical tradition that encountered garlic failed to use it therapeutically. The active compound is allicin, a sulfur molecule produced enzymatically when garlic cells are damaged by crushing, chopping, or biting. The enzyme alliinase, stored separately from its substrate in intact garlic cells, combines with the compound alliin when those cells are broken, producing allicin within seconds. But here is the preparation secret that changes everything, and that most people who cook garlic every day have never heard. Allicin is thermolabile. Heat destroys it almost immediately. If you put freshly crushed garlic directly into a hot pan, the alliinase enzyme denatures before the reaction can complete, and very little allicin forms. The solution is simple. Crush or finely chop garlic and let it sit at room temperature for 10 minutes before adding heat. In those 10 minutes, the enzymatic conversion completes, and allicin stabilizes into more heat-resistant organosulfur compounds, including ajoena and diallyl disulfide, that survive cooking. Studies comparing garlic added directly to heat versus garlic allowed to pre-react have found measurable differences in the concentration of active compounds in the finished food. This 10-minute rest is documented in food science literature. It was not in the ancient Egyptian prescriptions, but it is the reason that garlic braised whole in olive oil versus garlic allowed to rest after crushing and then added to a sauce are nutritionally different dishes. 1 clove, crushed, 10 minutes on the cutting board, then added to nearly anything. That is the ancient medicine your great-grandmother cooked with. Optimized. Number 1. Broccoli sprouts. This is the entry most people have never heard. Not broccoli, broccoli sprouts. 3-day-old broccoli seedlings. The size of alfalfa sprouts? That you can grow at home in a mason jar with nothing but water, seeds, and 3 days of patience. In 1992, researchers at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine set out to isolate the specific compound in broccoli responsible for its anti-cancer properties, which epidemiological studies had consistently associated with reduced cancer risk. They identified sulforaphane, a sulfur-containing isothiocyanate produced when the enzyme myrosinase acts on glucoraphanin, a glucosinolate present in cruciferous vegetables. Then they measured glucoraphanin concentrations in broccoli at different life stages. The finding was startling. 3-day-old broccoli sprouts contain between 20 and 100 times the concentration of glucoraphanin found in mature broccoli florets. The same plant, same genetic material, 100 times the concentration of the precursor compound at day 3. The resulting research, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 1997, demonstrated that extracts from small amounts of 3-day-old broccoli sprouts could significantly inhibit tumor formation in a rodent model of chemically induced breast cancer. The effect required amounts achievable through dietary intake, not pharmacological doses. The paper's lead author, Paul Talalay, described it as a remarkably potent inducer of protective enzymes. The mechanism involves something called phase 2 detoxification enzymes, cellular proteins that neutralize carcinogens and reactive oxygen species before they can damage DNA. Sulforaphane upregulates these enzymes by activating a transcription factor called NRF2, which functions as what researchers sometimes call the master switch of cellular antioxidant defense. Multiple subsequent human trials have confirmed that sulforaphane derived from broccoli sprouts activates NRF2 pathways in human subjects at dietary doses. Here is the critical preparation detail. Sulforaphane is not present in the raw plant. Glucoraphanin is. Sulforaphane is produced enzymatically when myrosinase, an enzyme, also present in the plant, meets glucoraphanin. This reaction requires that the plant cells be broken, either by chewing or cutting. It also requires that myrosinase remain active. Cooking destroys myrosinase. High heat steaming, roasting, and boiling all deactivate the enzyme. This means well-cooked broccoli or broccoli sprouts deliver glucoraphanin but little sulforaphane. Lightly steamed broccoli, 2 to 3 minutes. Still, bright green and firm, may preserve enough myrosinase for partial conversion. Raw broccoli sprouts, chewed thoroughly, deliver the full enzymatic conversion. If you must cook them, add a small amount of raw mustard powder to the cooked sprouts before eating. Mustard contains its own myrosinase, which survives intact in the dry powder and can catalyze the glucoraphanin to sulforaphane conversion even after the plant's own enzyme has been denatured by heat. This is not folk wisdom. It is documented in peer-reviewed food science literature. To grow broccoli sprouts, purchase broccoli sprouting seeds, not garden seeds, which may be treated with fungicides from a reputable supplier. Add 1 tablespoon to a quart-size mason jar with a sprouting lid or cheesecloth. Rinse with cool water. Drain, and invert the jar at an angle to allow drainage and airflow. Rinse twice daily. On day 3, move the jar to indirect light. By day 4, you have sprouts ready to eat. Store in the refrigerator for up to a week. The entire supplement industry built around sulforaphane capsules, powders, standardized extracts exists because this mechanism is real. The sprout in the mason jar on your kitchen counter contains the same mechanism in a living food form at a fraction of the cost. A final word on what processing destroys. There is a principle running underneath every entry in this list, and it is worth naming directly because it is the thing supplement marketing almost never acknowledges. The compounds that make these foods powerful do not exist as isolated molecules in nature. They exist in matrices, complex biological structures, where enzymes, cofactors, fiber, water, and fat interact. Myrosinase and glucoraphanin are stored in separate compartments in broccoli cells, waiting to combine. Alliin and alliinase are kept apart in garlic until you crush it. Beta-glucan in oats is woven into cell walls in a molecular weight that determines its viscosity and its clinical effect. Anthocyanins in blueberries exist alongside flavonols and phenolic acids that appear to modify their absorption. Selenium in Brazil nuts is present as selenomethionine, an organic form with different absorption kinetics than the inorganic sodium selenite used in many supplements. When you extract a single compound, standardize it, and put it in a capsule, you are simplifying a system that was not designed to be simplified. Sometimes it works, but consistently, when researchers compare food form nutrients to supplement form nutrients in rigorous trials, the food form performs differently, sometimes better, sometimes simply more predictably. The synergistic matrix is not a metaphor. It is a biochemical reality. This does not mean supplements are useless. It means they were never the starting point. The starting point was always the food. Your great-grandmother had no idea what sulforaphane was. She did not know the name beta-glucan or anthocyanin or allicin, but she grew kale in the backyard because it came up in fall when nothing else did. She added lemon to the lentil soup because it tasted right. She hung garlic in the kitchen because her mother hung garlic in the kitchen. And the children who grew up in those kitchens were nourished in ways that a plastic bottle in a pharmacy aisle is still working to approximate. If this conversation opened something for you, if even one of these 13 foods made you think differently about what is already sitting in your garden, your pantry, or your grocery store, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below which food surprised you most. Which one are you going to try this week? And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. Every week, we go deeper into the intersection of ancient wisdom, real food, and the science that is finally catching up with what our ancestors already knew. The richest pharmacy your body will ever have is already growing. The question is whether you will recognize it. This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider before making significant changes to your diet, particularly if you are managing a health condition or taking medications.